Oh, good afternoon. Thank you very much for all of those who joined. And apologies, yes, there was supposed to be sound there, but hopefully you got a feel for it. So today, as part of the webinar series, Cresco is talking about behind the meter energy solutions. I'm going to be touching on high-level impacts. John Seeliger, my colleague based in the Stellenbosch office, is going to be talking about some of the value of BESS, a few numbers and a few graphs. Krish is going to be talking about our experience of the project development process and some of our lessons learned and experiences. And then Alwyn, Coetzee, one of the Cresco advisory partners, ex-DBSA feasibility funding head, is going to be talking about how do we raise money for these projects, or at least to match fund if the promoter doesn't have these. So a very focused webinar today on a specific topic. We'll be having another one of these follow-ups in a couple of weeks' time, and then we will continue to hopefully get 4 or 5 webinars in for the rest of the year. We continue at one a month. We're aware of AEF next couple of weeks, so things might be slightly delayed, but thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just sorry, to confirm, this will be recorded and all the slides will be prepared, so you don't have to take screenshots. Normal process applies. So I guess this is sort of from 2020 when the NERSA sort of lifting of the generating license happened, and really private sector eventually turned from Excel projects into reality with all the bilateral deals signed last year, and then a few aggregator deals signed this year. And then also we've seen, I think, a couple of projects getting to financial close on the base rounds there. Sorry, Vermelia, I see there was a question on sound. Can you hear me? Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Frank. So I think we're talking about 2024 really is REAP 7 coming out. Hopefully these REAP 7 projects will get to financial close. Those tariffs are interesting. And then we've seen very much a huge focus on site PV and BESS. And I would say that in the client priority list, working for the off-taker, this was probably 3rd or 4th priority, and now has been moved up to probably the 1st priority. I think what's happening with Eskom is perhaps even gone down to 2nd priority now. So that's really been the focus of many large-scale clients and smallest clients, subject to their loads as well as their availability of land. And Cresco has been involved in developing a number of these projects. I think going into the future, and probably my most aspirational projection is large-scale gas getting to financial close by 2026. I think that's becoming less and less likely with the fact that the updated gas program is not out yet. We don't really know the rules. But we're also seeing perhaps the small dispatchable CNG, LPG, even dare we say it, probably grey hydrogen rather than green hydrogen being looked at as a support or supplementary fuel outside of diesel. So that's very much in the thinking. And then linking to 2028, where we believe that by then BESS, PV and BESS, or even BESS standalone, would allow some loads within reason to achieve at least a high portion of security of supply. So at the moment, most of our clients are probably looking at a 2-hour BESS, perhaps a 2-hour BESS dispatch twice a day. So maybe 3 to 4 hours of resilience, but we would hope that that might have moved close to 6 to 8 hours of resilience by 2028 and these projects being implemented. But by 2028, we also believe that utility scale projects, PV and BESS, is going to be the norm. We no longer just need energy at the 12 o'clock. In fact, it's become a nuisance. We also see some of this large scale BESS from the government procurement, perhaps achieving a COD, probably more rounds of BESS coming out from the government procurement, and then perhaps also standalone BESS funded by the private sector selling into the market. And for us, we started to do some of these feasibility studies around how that works. We note government's recent ministerial determination for 750 megawatts of technology agnostic solutions around ancillary services. So we think that potentially could be a partial off-taker, as well as assisting in the overs and unders from balancing that's going to be required under SAWEM. So if you don't have a BESS strategy behind the stage, and in fact, if you haven't implemented at least a small scale BESS, I think by next year, you're also going to be behind the stage because everyone's moving ahead. And alongside there, we also see new hydro, perhaps imports coming to South Africa, and perhaps using some of the gas in Mozambique to start supporting the grid from a dispatchability point of view, and perhaps even some BESS in SAP, perhaps benefiting the South African grid because of the electron transfers. Next slide, please. So, yeah, the value of BESS from a grid balancing point of view. So I'm sure you're aware Cresco has done some load shedding forecasting. We managed to get the February one right. We're currently doing some work for clients around the Eskom winter outlook. We would love if the outlook was as optimistic as it is, but we do have some question marks and challenges, and we're doing some updates for clients. But if you just took the view of 2024 last year and then the view of 2030 going forward based on the Cresco rollout, you can see where BESS starts playing a role or an opportunity to start balancing the grid. And this is outside of just the PV and BESS for arbitrage. This is really grid balancing support. I live in Europe and was part of the Portugal-Spain blackout and the various reasons, but I think even though there's different fingers being pointed at, everyone believes that there could definitely be much higher BESS in the system. And I believe Australia is probably far ahead of everyone else in terms of making sure these IRP aspirations are turning into real projects. But as I said, the value of BESS is increasingly being seen not just a financial contribution or a way of moving the energy from certain times of the day, but definitely in terms of supporting the grid as well. It is not the only technology. We still believe that you need other technologies, imported hydro, as well as the gas, both outside of South Africa and inside of South Africa there. But then we think there's a huge opportunity for BESS. And with the prices for lithium coming down, and I see there was an article around China and a sodium project at scale, we're very excited about BESS and various technologies and how it could support the grid going forward. So for us, it's definitely part of the plan. Next slide, please. So how does BESS and that effect or behind the meter affect SAWEM? Now, Cresco is co-hosting an event with Energy Council and Nedbank and Bowman's at the AEF in 2 weeks' time. So I hope you can attend. And if you haven't been invited, please send us a link and we can get you there. Nice big venue. But we are aware of some interesting opportunities / risks within SAWEM. But we believe behind the meter projects, specifically with BESS, can play a strong part in de-risking clients. So firstly, the view at the moment is that 10 megawatt generators, either wheeling or on site, single 10 megawatts would have to become balance responsible parties. Now, if it's a renewable only generation, at least PV and wind only, that is very hard to be balance responsible because of the type of technology as well as the inaccuracy of the forecasting due to weather conditions. And that's where we believe BESS will also play a role in terms of helping cover these overs and unders and this risk in the balancing there. And I think that is stated explicitly in the code, but implicitly we think this will also affect smaller loads where over time we think this rule might be extended to aggregators of projects above 10 megawatts. So this is very much the rooftop type players, not residential, but perhaps commercial office box. And we know a lot of the REITs out there probably have in excess of 20 or 30 megawatts of existing generation. So even those sort of clients out there would also have to consider the impact of balance responsibility. And that's where we believe that the rooftop solar or even large behind the scale meter, mostly PV, we don't see very many wind projects behind the meter, would have to consider the obligations applied under SAWEM for balance responsible loads as part of the thinking. And that is where BESS attached to the on-site generation is a must to mitigate that. There are a number of other concerns within SAWEM, which is not the focus of today, but we are very excited about how SAWEM is being pushed ahead. We're waiting for the second part of the version 2 of the market code to come out. I think Keith Bowen is doing a phenomenal job of pushing that ahead. And I know the private sector is starting to engage more and more with, what does this mean for us? And how does this affect many of our current bilateral contracts, both for on-site and wheeling, and how do these need to be amended to take an advantage of the market going forward? So behind the meter also has impacts from SAWEM from there. Thank you very much. Next slide, please, and the next presenter, I believe. John, over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. Thanks, Rumi. So just on to reiterate the theme that Rob's sort of discussed is businesses and players in the energy market are going to need to figure out, looking forward, what the best solution is going to be for them behind the meter. So we've done a bit of work for a high load factor client on savings for on-site projects versus wheeling. Eskom connected clients. So just going to quickly show you a little comparison, and then we move on to sort of looking into the future. So what you're going to be focused on as the slides tick through is sort of the red sections on the bottom left, and then sort of the numbers changing in terms of savings. What we see here is a 110 megawatt example for an on-site project, solar project, 15-year PPA. So I think you can go to the next slide. So this is for the 24-25 tariff structure. The next slide is under the currently approved NERSA RTP. So what we see changing, we actually have a little bit of an increase in savings, and that's mainly due to a feed-in tariff becoming available under the Eskom. If you're Eskom connected and you have an export line, there's an offset credit available to you. There's a change in the proposed time of use schedules and variable charge ratios that's coming into play. A legacy charge has been introduced, and a generation capacity charge has been approved by NERSA, but lower than what was asked for by Eskom. And then what we see here is the fixed cost portion of the tariff structure is only at 5.5%. Next slide, please, for me. And then in a medium-term, longer-term Cresco view, we see we've updated our time of use schedule for what we see happening in the market in terms of solar coming into play, the solar generation midday, leading to some off-peak hours, the legacy and ancillary fixed charges coming into play. So moving from a variable to a fixed charge, thereby increasing your fixed portion of your utility cost with Eskom. And we also see Eskom eventually getting the full generation capacity charge they've asked for. And in tandem with that, an increase in transmission charges, as we know that infrastructure is required going forward. And where we see there is Rob?
No, sorry, finish the slide and I'll ask the question, please.
Sure. And then what we see then is a dip in savings up to 74% for this specific example. Big impact on the analysis is whether you have a high load factor or low load factor as well.
So I guess, yeah, exactly. So I think the comment I wanted to reiterate that you mentioned at the end is that this is an example of an example. This is not a bespoke client. Load factor has a key determinant of it. And as Shirley Solvaldi mentioned, and she might mention tomorrow, in terms of tariff structuring, when you take from the one hand, you need to go to the other. So there's always this rebalancing. But I mean, John, tell us a bit about the complexity of this analysis, and maybe not the actual calculations, but it's more around trying to predict the tariffs into the future. Yeah, what type of work have we done there, just to give people confidence around the fixed portion percentages and that?
Sure. So like Rob mentioned, the balancing factors around generation. So if we're increasing generation capacity charge, we need to rebalance that generation, overall generation cost. So if you're increasing your fixed charge, you have to decrease that variable portion. And so we balance that looking forward. And in addition, in terms of our increase in fixed costs, our legacy charges and ancillary charges, we've based those and come up with some estimates based on KVA. This might change, this might be based on max output, but we're trying to sort of crystal ball gaze into what we think is going to happen. And we do see Eskom aligning their fixed costs closer to the way their cost profiles work within the business. And then on the time of use schedules, as mentioned, the nuance there is we see the time of use sort of schedule changing with the impact of solar coming into play over time.
Cool. Thank you. Please continue.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. Then on the next slide, this is for on-site. So we're looking at, there was an on-site impact. We see about a 26% there in this example of an example, as Rob mentioned. Here we see the same starts at 24, 25. Next slide, Vumi. On the wheeling, what we see here coming into play, the only thing that sort of is different from what we mentioned on the on-site is the affordability subsidy charge is no longer being credited for wheeling under NERSA's approval of the retail tariff plan. And what we see is we know that the legacy charge is not recovered in the wheeling credit, as well as the variable portion of the generation capacity charge. So it's a bit of a downside for wheeling. We see a significant drop in savings to 55%. Next slide, please, with me. And then under our medium term or longer term view, we see fixed charges increasing to 13.7, which mentioned before on onsite, and everything else sort of staying the same. And then we've got the hourly recons coming into play, which we also see happening in the medium term. And that's sort of also a big factor in terms of sort of data that the companies will require to do forecasting, and being balance responsible parties on an hourly basis will be more onerous.
So John, we just to put this in context, so we obviously leading into the PV and BESS slides, but on-site gives you a much better sort of savings and is more resilient, if you can use the energy word, against the changes to the Eskom retail tariff plan. But what are the key opportunities that we've identified, and I know I'll bring the slides, from the work we've done for BESS?
Yeah, so the key opportunities, as you move to the slides, we'll go through a bit of what we see the role it's going to play in the future. But for on-site, I mean, you've got the flexibility to be able to add BESS on-site. We do see savings for BESS. It's still being valuable from a wheeling perspective, but far more from an on-site perspective, and sort of smoothing the profiles and adding to the resilience of on-site savings. So yeah, that's just in a nutshell. That's what we're going to see, and we'll discuss in the slides ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks for me. Next slide. So here we just summarized on-site versus wheeling savings. So just in green and red again, sort of what's in favor of on-site offset credit becoming available. If you're Eskom connected and you've got an export line, there's a couple of nuances there. Wheeling having been done on a monthly basis, the reconciliations versus hourly, you will see a drop there as we move to hourly recons. We see that becoming a reality of the market. And the legacy charges mentioned, and the other charges not being included in the WEB's credit, which was originally included as a credit on your bill. And then fixed charges we see increasing into the future. So just to show there on the right, there's a nice graph just to show sort of the impact on savings for on-site versus wheeling over the longer term. Again, this is just an example of an example, just to show in comparison what we see on the saving side. Right, next slide with me. All right, so this is probably a more interesting slide, and what we're trying to sort of get the message across for today is moving towards the liberalized market, the SAWEM market. In terms of the impact on savings, as a nutshell, we've reiterated is we see savings expect to decrease further if you're an Eskom connected client. They've increased in fixed costs, and the time of use schedule changes with the addition of solar PV, and alongside that the hourly energy reconciliations, which will come into play. In terms of the value of BESS, we're seeing the capital costs of BESS projects really decreasing. We've got some good benchmarks coming through for 24, 25 and ahead, and we just see these costs continue to decrease to a point where we see BESS standalone being feasible, and standing on its own 2 feet. The security of supply is no longer the only driver of value for BESS. In terms of arbitrage on its own, with PV, without PV, can, depending on your load and your tariff structure, that could definitely be valuable. And then when we look at the future role of BESS, there are quite a few points where BESS can add value, and figuring out what the optimal solution is for you and how you're going to use your BESS, depending on which stakeholder you are on the energy market and what role you're playing, that's going to be very important. And at this stage, it's still sort of a crystal ball gazing exercise and determining what your best use case is for your BESS. So first off, smoothing of energy profiles and aligning your demand and generation will be very valuable. And then, as we mentioned, arbitraging energy arbitrage of BESS from off-peak to peak periods, as they change, and sort of having a view on what those schedules, time of use periods will look like in the future is something that you need to start thinking about. And then if you are a balanced responsible party, so i.e. more than 10 megawatts, the balancing and forecasting is going to play a big role, and avoiding certain penalties within the market is going to be quite important, and BESS can certainly help mitigate that risk. And then on the other hand, the standby ancillary service, which Rob also touched on, of the BESS is going to be a big player in the market, a big value add, and we see standalone BESS there also being of value. And then lastly, still security of supply will still be relevant. We still see load shedding playing a role over the medium to long term in terms of our estimates. So if you believe Cresco, I mean, the security of supply is still a factor. So there are various sort of use cases for BESS, numerous use cases for BESS going forward. So your optimization of the BESS is definitely going to be important in understanding your own energy strategy. And just on the right there, we've got a graph in terms of just showing an example of an example for the value of BESS, where we've increased our peak period renewable energy consumption by 85% for PV only versus PV BESS as an example. And then just below that, what we're showing there, which I think is more interesting, is we've tried to model a sort of future market approach in terms of how we want to use our BESS and maximize time of use in renewable energy excess sales in peak time of use periods. So if you're a generator, you have excess energy and you want to offtake or sell on that energy, or if you're an IPP, an aggregator trader, how can I maximize my energy that I could sell into the market or sell to my offtaker in peak periods? And I think that's also where an interesting case value case is for BESS in sort of a future outlook. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's all from my side. Thanks.
Cool, John. So thank you. There are two questions. One is on the, does Eskom have the ability to, or policy around buying energy from behind the meter projects there? So what we have seen typically for most of our clients is that the asset life of the generator is typically longer than the asset life of the load. And therefore, many of our projects are set up to be export facilities, either in the medium to long term or from day one. And in that situation, there's bi-directional meters, and obviously you need budget quotes and things like that. But the short-term standard offer program is there. Or if you are a client, you can have wheeling set up already in your system. So you have on-site and then wheeling set up. So we do believe Eskom can accommodate maybe not large volumes of energy, but smaller volumes of energy under the scenario that you have there. John, do you want to talk about the Cape Town buying of excess energy that we saw some of the other work, how they do it?
Yeah, that's sure. So we've been looking at some of Cape Town's their wheeling arrangement and their processes. So they've got a sort of forward-looking wheeling setup, which has been very interesting to look at, and I think it incentivizes wheeling into the Western Cape. So how they've typically set it up, instead of having the wheeling credit on your bill, typically through Eskom, what they do is if they facilitate the wheeling, they take the credit. The Cape Town COCT will take the wheeling credit themselves, and they will charge you a completely new tariff structure as a wheeling customer. So you'll be paying for use of system charges on the total energy usage that you have as a demand or load. And then on any excess energy that you pull from the grid, you'll have a new tariff structure, which is discounted to other customers under the Western Cape municipality. So the net sort of sum there, or the formula still comes out as in terms of in your favor and sort of gives you the same answer. But currently we see the wheeling arrangement from the Western Cape being more beneficial than Eskom wheeling credit as it stands.
Oh, thank you. And then there's a comment about best locations under the government program versus private sector. So we definitely believe that the primary opportunity will be based on existing generation sites where there's already a grid connection and it's using the excess energy perceived either because the load can't take it or because perhaps this energy is going to become a little bit less worthless into the market going forward. and we believe that is the best way to support the grid. My understanding that is strategically, if you look at the government-based programs, a lot of those are really set up to reduce curtailment issues within the transmission lines, whereas the base that we see is more around mopping up generation and supporting the grid. So similar technology, but definitely used in a different manner. And then the other question is, our understanding is that, and I don't know if it's explicitly stated in the market code, but that any generator, irrespective of Eskom connected or municipal, will have to be balance responsible and therefore be part of the process. I think there's a bigger question mark around municipalities being able to take on those obligations on behalf of its own generators and loads. I think some municipalities might be able to do that if they have their own generation, but if you don't, then I imagine that the individual generator would have to comply with the balancing obligations as set up under SAWEM. Hope that answered the questions. Thank you, John. I don't think there's any more questions, but thank you for that. Krish, tell us how we develop these projects, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krish Pillay. My first project development was in the early 2000s, and I've been involved in various capacities in project development ever since. One of the first energy projects that I was involved with was a 2 million ton per annum LNG facility anchored by 1600 megawatt combined cycle turbine generation plant, and that was started in 2003. And if that project went ahead, the LNG supply agreement would have been nearing its end as we speak today. But unfortunately, Eskom pulled the plug on that, so that project didn't really go ahead. Some of the projects that I've been involved with while at Eskom, most notably, is I led Eskom's new generation capacity client office, which included the development of Medupi, Coetzee, Ankroluk, and Quarikwa. And then while at Anglo, did some mining projects, most notably the Unki mine in Zimbabwe. For the last 8 years, I've been with Cresco and managed from development stage to financial close several 100 megawatts of renewable energy projects, and been involved with many more which are still in the pipeline. I think today's discussion, my part of it at least, will be very relevant to renewable energy in the CNI environment. And we know that, given cost constraints and just availability and reliability of energy coming out of Eskom, that's many of our clients and I'm sure many more CNI businesses out there are considering this. So I think this is quite an important topic that we're covering. So from project development point of view, I think the most basic form that I can share with you is that what we're really trying to do is quantify the benefits and opportunity that comes across your table. So, be that a R&E or a renewable energy project or any other type of project, but, we'll focus mainly on renewable energy projects. And then depends on what you find in your initial assessments, that will determine the next steps that you take. And then it might be a repetitive sort of process because you're going to do this at the beginning of each of your stages in the process. Yeah, and then I think the most important message that I want to get across to you today is that, if you find a way to do the above, defining the benefits and risks in the shortest time frame and at the least cost, that would, if I can get that across to you, then I think I've done my job here today. So I'll give you a few pointers today on how we can do this by sharing some of the experiences that I had in my personal capacity. And then at Cresco, we have, more than 200 projects that we've been involved with in various capacities over the last 20 years. So there's a huge amount of information and knowledge that we have access to that, we're trying to share with you today. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do justice in everything given the short sort of space of time, but, obviously what we do today will give you an idea of what can and can't be done. And also then, you could ask the right questions when you embark on your project development exercise. Okay, so from a CNI renewable energy project point of view, the development, the most important we think is that viability assessment, which you will do right at the beginning of your project.
Change. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Vuni. Yeah, we should have been on that slide already. Yeah. So, yeah, that will be the most important, single step that you would follow, because it'll give you an idea very quickly whether your project has any merit in pursuing, or whether you should stop, immediately. The slide, I'm not really going to touch on all the details on the slide. You can have a look at that. As Rob said already, we're going to share those slides. So why do so many projects fail? If it is so simple as I am saying, I think the main reason is, there's a few examples that we've given you already, but the main one I think that I would like to touch on is that there's an ill-advised focus on many non-essential activities, and normally these are very expensive activities that, in some cases, particularly with renewable energy projects, you don't even need to do it, because if you understand the full process, there comes a time towards the end of it where you would engage with EPC contractors and so on, and they normally do all the technical and other studies which cost a lot, and we don't have to do that during the development phase. Some of the very simple and cost, from a cost point of view, very low, things like rezoning and applying most of the permits that you would apply for do not cost your consultants, or if you do it yourself, does not cost a lot. The example that comes to mind is rezoning. Really to rezone your property could take a very, very long period of time. But all you need to get that done is, you need to get a good town planner in place. And over the years, we've come across several examples where rezoning has caused huge amount of delay in project development timeline. The one example that still fresh in my memory from about a year and a half back is where we were involved with a project where the municipality had numerous key personnel changing, and then also there's a tribunal that actually is made up of municipal employees and also people from the community and so on, and these people were not being paid by the municipality, so they were not sitting. The tribunal was not sitting, and there was almost a year of delays in actually the rezoning. So this is an example of a simple activity, does not cost a lot, but scupper the project for a long period of time. We can move on to the next slide, please, for me. Okay. Yeah. So what this slide is trying to show is, especially if you look at the diagram on the the right hand side, you'll see that the importance of de-risking a project and the impact that it has on some of the benefits, and also what it does to project costs as you go through that process. So you cannot overemphasize, that the earlier you look at the risks that your project is facing and put some realistic and practical plans in place, the better it is. And that's not just from a quantitative point of view where you do the numbers and so on, but it's also the way your project will be perceived, and what sentiment it conveys to your partners, funders, and principals if you're doing this on an engagement point of view. Another, if I look at risk, another story that comes to mind is we were involved in the project many years ago. Throws these curved balls at that project. So in this particular one, it was in a relatively quite sort of stretch of the N1 highway, we did several studies on the traffic count and traffic impacts and so on. And Sunrail had then agreed on the type of intersection where the project access road, intersects with the N1. And about 2 months prior to financial close, they came up and said, well, this is actually a test area for a high-speed test that they've approved, and that putting in a normal sort of, like a level stop street type crossing is not going to do. You need to put an overhead bridge with on-ramps and off-ramps and so on. Added a huge amount of cost to the project, which was not sort of provisioned. And also from a timeline point of view, added a few anxious weeks in redesigning and getting that approval through. So again, try and identify as early as possible the risks that you think your project is going to face. Okay, the next slide. So what we've done for, I sound like I'm oversimplifying the development process for a renewable energy project, but I think that's the reality of it. There's the technical aspects are quite simple. As long as you can quantify the energy yield, which you can do quite easily, depending on your location. You have an off-taker. The rest of it is really a commercial and a financial exercise. So we look at that early viability assessment, and this is a process that we've sort of developed at Cresco, just based on the experience that we have in this type of projects. So the main thing is we look at the viability assessment and then the pre-feasibility study. And then from there, we go straight into a bankable study. So we skip the concept and pre-feasibility and so on, because we don't think that it's relevant in this particular type of project development. So once we've established during the viability assessment that the project doesn't have any fatal flaws, and it becomes, like I said, a commercial and financial challenge. We'll talk about the technical side later, but for now, I would like to debunk the myth that front-end loading, when it comes to solar PV projects, enjoys the same sort of importance as you would on a complicated, say, a chemical type project. In those, you would need lots of front-end loading and stage gates to identify and mitigate, because you have many complicated processes that you're working with, and all need to be integrated. In a solar project, you don't need several stages of front-end loading to de-risk, because the technical aspects are really quite simple. So if you look at a renewable energy project, even you look at what you get out of your simulation programs, and there are quite a few, globally accepted, that are used by most professional outfits like PVSys and Helioscope and so on, which actually gives you a simplified version of your electrical design. At the right time, your EPC contractor would take that, and they'll do their own yield assessments and come up with their own designs for everything, including those simple, the single line diagrams that you get out of your initial investigations. So if we look at your finance, you need a robust revenue model, and for that you need to prove that the plant proposed has a generation profile, and that comes out of your energy yield analysis. And again, you could optimize that as much as you want to later on, but your initial studies based on the location and so on is going to give you 80 to 90% accuracy based, if you compare to what you're going to get if you continue doing minor improvements on that. So what you get first time around is quite suitable for the type of level of analysis you're doing at this stage. You need a plant that's reliable and to be able to give you that generation profile, and then you need a secure offtake at the correct tariff. And with those three, so your reliability of the plant will give you your guarantees on the generation. So with that, you can then develop your revenue model, and then you'll need to understand the cost structure. Normally, the biggest cost in this type of projects is the EPC cost, and if you're doing it on a project funding basis, then obviously the cost of debt is huge, often as big as your EPC cost. So you develop based on that, you need to look at what the risk profile of your project is, and based on that, you'll develop a balanced risk package that often starts with the clients wanting to pass all that risks to everyone else, but we know that doesn't work. You've got to have a package that is balanced in the sense that firstly, the party that's best able to handle the risk does it so that they can do it at the least cost. And if you try to pass all the risk on to other parties, and if it is your project, nobody will want to touch that project. Okay, then you need proof that you got a consistent, sustainable cash flow to service your debt and operations, and the best way to do that is through guarantees that you'd obtain from the banks, or through putting in a 3 to 6 month type deposit in terms of what your expected cash flows are for energy produced, if you're going the IPP route, and I'll talk about that just now. Okay, and then the other aspects like O&M and so on is not really that big a cost item in a renewable energy project. So if you look at the commercial aspects, obviously you need a buyer with good credentials. If you're going the IPP route, you become the buyer of the energy, and then you need to prove your business sustainability. If you're building it on your own, then you'll appoint an EPC contractor, either on your balance sheet or on some sort of limited recourse basis. And then you'll have normally to manage your risk, you'll house that in a special purpose vehicle. In both cases, you'll be able to provide guarantees of business continuity and bonds from reputable financial institutes to ensure that your initial construction costs, and in the case of IPP, the IPP will give you these for the future performance of the plant. We know that today's discussion is on behind the meter aspects of renewable energy projects, but one of the best ways to mitigate against a stranded asset, if your business for some reason in the future does not or becomes non-viable, is to have a wheeling connection. And the problem with wheeling connection, obviously, you need to deal with this, get the budget quotes and so on. And normally IPPs are better equipped to sell excess energy that you generate to the system. But if you have to do it yourself, it's not difficult. I think Rob did mention the markets and where that is going. So that's going to become easier as we go forward. On the technical aspects, the key equipment, pretty standard. There's not much difference between the different vendors. They all, if you stick to tier 1 equipment, that you're getting reputable vendors. The tier 1 equipment deals a little bit with technical aspects and a lot with financial, and talking about the Bloomberg tier 1 sort of categorization, because the big aspect, the big part of, or one of the big key equipment that you would get on a renewable energy project, PV project, is the panels. And the panels are guaranteed for extended periods of time, and you need an organization that can still be around. So there's a big focus from Bloomberg when they do their rating on the financial ability of those companies to be around for a long term as well. Okay, and then as far as
Chris, can you finish off in 2 minutes? We've got to give Alwyn a bit of a go.
Yeah, I've got one more slide, I think. Yes. Okay, and then just finishing off on the technical aspects. You know, on the smaller plants that we would see on the CNI side of the business, normally less than a hectare, or if you're in a red zone, you have special dispensations. Also, if you're less than a megawatt in size, then your registration process, you know, is a lot simpler. Your grid code compliance, you know, fall into the category A3. Also, a lot simpler than in the bigger projects. And then if you're doing a group project, then it's sort of entirely construction ready almost from day one. Okay, so you can go on to the next slide. So we talk, again, you'll have access to the slides, so I'm not going to go through all the bullets there, but essentially, you know, what you see in the theory and what you experience when you're embarking on a project like this, there's a vast difference. So, you know, there's always good to just dwell a little while on the realities of project development. So nothing normally goes according to plan. So the more you plan and the better you plan early around, allow yourself some float and so on to make sure that you overcome any setbacks that you have. You know, the simple things normally catch you up. The big things are normally dealt with properly. You know, another example that comes to mind is where you got to get consents from landowners. Often developers would look at the plant area, secure that, get all the consents required there, and then forget all about the servitudes that are required. So, and then often this catches you out because you start dealing with that later on when, you know, after somewhere halfway down the road, and then it's too late. And the small things there, again, even within that servitude, like, you know, if you have your servitude for grid connection, you know, and this is an example more on a wheeling type project, you could set you back if one of the landowners doesn't give you, you know, permission to go through. And then we've had several examples of that recently. So that's in a nutshell. Obviously, you know, we can talk about this for a very long time, and there's lots of things that I didn't mention here that are as important, but maybe not as important as the ones I did mention. We just try to highlight some of the aspects, you know, to keep in mind that you need to do this. And then I suppose the next slide, and then I'm done, Vumile. Like any good webinar, if we don't have a sales pitch included in that, then we haven't done our job. So we've done this type of exercise many times over and over, you know, over the past 20 years, and very much so on the renewable energy side over the last 10 years or so. So our value proposition, really, we've tailor-made this process based on our examples. We've got a similar to a menu type service based on project specific requirements and what your needs are. And then, you know, we can do this very efficiently with from a time point of view and a cost time of view. So, you know, Vumile will circulate our contact details and so on, and then you can make contact if you need to. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Sorry to cut you off there. I know you want to roll. There weren't any questions in the list, and I think in the interest of time. So, Alwyn, you've got 8 minutes to take us home. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. As Robert indicated, I mean, Alwyn Coetzee. I was previously with the DBSA. In my last 10 years at the DBSA, I was heading up the project preparation department that was introduced after the DBSA you know, had some financial difficulties and need to be restructured. And one of the areas that was advised that we create a project preparation capacity and finance that from the balance sheet. Man, as you would realize, you know, that a bank is there to conclude loans, and that's where they earn their income from, or their revenue from. But the experience was that a lot of transactions or projects landed up in the pipeline, which is not sufficiently prepared to bankability. So a lot of time is wasted on that. That leads to frustration on all parties' behalf. So my talk will be from the DBSA perspective, but I'm aware that other DFIs, for example, have similar facilities. For example, the IDC and other institutions up in here in Africa and in Europe, which I'm aware of. So the DFI here is prepared to share some of the risk, the upfront risk for projects, and they would be willing to spend up to 50% of the project development cost. And as been highlighted there by Krish, they would be willing to do that after the pre-feasibility study has been done by the developer, so that one knows that, for example, there are no fatal flaws associated with the project. The volume of the project size that they would normally look at, it will depend on what is in it for the DFI. What I mean by that, is there a lending opportunity? What is the use in doing all this upfront work if there's not an investment or loan opportunity for the DFI? So in general terms, I would say from, say, 50 million upwards, and it can actually go quite high. I'm aware of a project currently, up in Africa that they considering with the investment value is up $3 billion, which they obviously do part of the financing of that. So the more advanced your project is in the development phase, obviously the higher the appetite is. They don't want to sit for 3-4 years in the development phase of the project. So appetite is for projects that has made a start worth addressing the development side of things. So the purpose of this, as I indicated, is that projects are adequately prepared to reach the bank feasibility stage. Now, when I've ended my time at the DBSA, I've looked for advisors that's in the financial sphere, because my opinion is that your financial advisor has really a 360 view on what's happening in a project, give guidance from the technical right down to the environmental legal side of things. And in my mind, based on the performance and standing of Cresco in the market, I've entered into a service level agreement with them, where I've myself focusing on the early stage development phase of projects. Now, eligible criteria at a high level, projects, being a public institution, have to look at projects that's within the national and sectoral government policies. And the type of projects would be all types of economic infrastructure. Going without saying, the projects that we've discussed, is exactly within that particular realm of eligibility. So they would consider both projects in the public and private sector for development funding. And you must have very clear give the comfort to the DFI, the commitment from you as a developer to develop the project and have a very firm idea on the time frame that it will take. Next slide, please. So I just thought, when you're thinking about this, let me just give you sort of high-level terms of this project development facility or project preparation, has been commonly known, is what they will do. I think that it's kind of assist in the risk that the developer is taking. So we know that there's always a cost associated when a bank considers your to provide credit, or in this case preparation funding to you. So what they say is that if they consider project preparation funding for you, if the project facility is concluded, there's no DD cost. But if you decide to walk away midway in this process, then you will be liable for the cost that they've incurred, and they have standard cost that they would assign to when they enter. They will enter into an engagement letter with you, where the terms are then ironed out, and then. As I said, they must have an opportunity to provide debt funding. There's also, if they like the project, for lack of a better term, the project, they would be able to roll up the preparation funding into the equity of the project. And the preparation funding that they provide is refundable at financial close by the project. Now, repayment conditions, I think, is very good in the sense, if the project is not bankable, you don't repay the money. The DFI, or in this case the DBSA, is taking that risk. So hence the foregoing areas that I've pointed out. But if you decide not to complete the project, walk away from the project for whatever reason, then you're liable. And the way that they decide whether the project is bankable is simply, once the project is prepared ready for BFS, if the banks, DFIs, commercial banks decide it is fundable, then it's been termed as then you don't repay. If the banks say it's not financeable, then obviously you are released of the obligations from that perspective. Next slide, please. So what information, and I'll just stick to the basic stuff, are required if you consider a project which you would like to approach, the development finance providers, is that, basically you need a comprehensive description of the project, where it sits at the moment, and the estimate, what's the capital that you require. Secondly is the ownership, the structure of the project and who owns the project. I think we all understand in what time and age we're living. So at this very early stage, the KYC will be executed on the company or the proposed company. Then who are the off-takers? So, who's going to pay for electrons, and what's the stage of, for example, your PPA? And what's the current stance of the off-takers? Policy alignment, which I've pointed out earlier. And then is the site and sponsorship details. You need to have some certainty where your project will be located, the access to land rights, as well as the role of the project sponsor. And this is actually a point representing a wider kind of issues, and that is in terms of the legal requirements that your project has to meet. From experience, that's probably the area that give rise to a lot of delays and having a project concluded. If there's certain statutory requirements that you have not meet, other than land use, has been pointed out earlier in this discussion. Then, to determine the level of development funding that will be made available, they would like to know the pre-feasibilities that has been completed, how much it did cost you, and what were the outcome of that. And then the last point that I would just want to raise here is as it's a public institution, they will look at the procurement process that you followed in procuring your advisors. For private sector, they will follow your policies in terms of procurement. obviously they will review it. If they're happy with that, they will accept it. For a public institution, obviously, you have to comply with the laws of the land there. Thank you, Rob.
Well, thank you very much. You caught up very well, Alwyn. Get you a copy after this. So thanks everyone for joining us. As we said, the slides will be sent to you and a recording. Apologies again for our mess up last week. Not all our fault. Teams is also responsible, and hope you can join us at the next one. And appreciate your time. Have a good remaining Wednesday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.